workers, minimum wage workers, a raise, and they have earned it. As we vote on this legislation today, it's worth reflecting on some recent history. In 2009, when the federal minimum wage increased to $7.25, Virginia, the rest of the country, was navigating the turmoil of the Great Recession. At that time, that increase helped to stabilize Virginia's families and small businesses who depended on their local communities. In the years that followed, Virginia's workers helped to heal and rebuild our economy, but the minimum wage did not budge, and too many workers did not benefit from the recovery that made it all possible. They were left behind. This is the story of how Virginia became the best state for business and the worst place for workers. In these last 11 years, as health care became more expensive and housing became more expensive and college became more expensive, the minimum wage did not go up, not one penny. All things considered, Virginia now has the lowest minimum wage in the nation. That's why we have worked so hard to get this legislation right. Even as we have confronted myths and misinformation about the minimum wage, despite some claims to the contrary, increases in the minimum wage have not led to job losses. And by raising our minimum wage, Virginia would hardly be an outlier. In 2020 alone, 25 states across the country will increase wages for their minimum wage workers. In reality, this bill will benefit nearly 800,000 people in Virginia, both in urban areas and rural areas. It will help to close the gender pay gap. It will help to close the racial pay gap. It will make entire families and communities stronger in every corner of this Commonwealth. And here's how we're going to accomplish it. In January 2021 through January 2022, the minimum wage in Virginia will increase to $9.50. And the next year, from 2022 to 2023, it will be $11 an hour. And then January 2023 through 2025, it will be $12 an hour. And that's when the General Assembly will do what you have asked it to do, is to study. And we're going to have a commission to study minimum wage to see, and it will be comprehensive, and it's going to examine the impact on employers and workers. And the General Assembly will then have the opportunity to come back and vote on legislation that completes the path to $15 an hour by January 2026. That's only 1 year later than we had anticipated in the first legislation that was filed. This bill also removes certain exclusions in our law, which means that some workers, like domestic service workers, will finally be guaranteed a minimum wage for the very first time. It's going to be also important that we close exclusions because many of them were just rooted in Jim Crow. I know the debate over minimum wage can sometimes feel abstract and technical, but ultimately, this is about people, hard-working people who are doing everything right, and they are still struggling to survive. This legislation is for those parents who can't be around to help their children with their homework because they're juggling 2 or 3 minimum wage jobs. This legislation is not going to allow them to go off on a vacation or anything, but it might just allow them to get a Happy Meal for a child for once in their life. This legislation is for people who clean our hotel rooms, our offices, long after we have gone home to be with our families. And this legislation is for so many people who feel invisible in our economy, but who are essential to our success. This legislation says, at long last, we value you. And I ask that you pass this bill.
The delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Madam Speaker, would the gentlelady yield for a question?
Will the delegate yield?
Yes, I
Delegate
will.
yield.
And I'm just now trying to read this, and I apologize, but
That's okay.
are there any regional, in the Senate, I believe when they passed their bill out, they had some a regional component that would allow certain regions of the state to pay up the prevailing wage and things of that nature. Is there anything in this bill that would allow like the more rural parts of the state to pay less than a Fairfax County or a more urban part of the state?
Madam Speaker, I would say to the gentleman, these two bills are exact.
So, further question, Madam Speaker?
Delegate Kilgore.
So, the $9 an hour that we go to, $9.50, I believe, an hour that we go to, that's statewide, is that correct?
That is statewide.
And then up to $11 still continues to be statewide.
Madam Speaker, I would say yes.
And then, Madam Speaker, further question?
Delegate Kilgore.
So at some point in time, though, before it gets to $15 an hour, this General Assembly has to come back and reenact for it to go on to 15. Is that correct?
Madam Speaker, I would say to the gentleman that we're going to have that study that everyone had requested. We're going to look at it, compare it to see if it's something that will work statewide. But right now, people will be able to live a little better until we can get that study done.
Thank you.
The delegate from Botetourt, Delegate Head.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Speaking to the conference report.
Delegate Head, you have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this is better, but it's still really bad. And there is a perception from people who have never run a business that business owners never want to take care of their employees, that business owners always are looking for putting down the worker. And I have no doubt that there may be some out there that do that, but business doesn't have a magic pot of money. And the wages that are paid to get the best employee that you can for the price that you can squeeze out to take you. You want to take care of them, but you've also got to make sure that you've got customers. And every time you raise a wage, you've got to raise a price. And when you're dealing with minimum wage jobs, again, minimum wage jobs were never intended to be the jobs that provide for your family. That was never, ever the concept until that conversation got started. I think about 10 or 12 years ago, I started hearing people talk about the move and talking about it being a living wage. Minimum wage was never, ever, ever designed to be a minimum wage. It was supposed to be an entry level and a starting point. And what we've always done is follow in Virginia, as in most states, the federal minimum wage. When that goes up, then we have to go up. But it's never yielded, ever, what people wanted it to yield when they demanded this big increase, because within about 18 months, prices bubble up and people are right back where they are. A great example for that can be found in the op-ed that was in the New York Times just this year. January 1st of this year, New York City raised their minimum wage to $15 an hour. And then there was an op-ed on January the 4th that said, now that it's 15, we need to really address the fact that this is not far enough. It really ought to be $33 an hour. Because you see, when your mindset is that the minimum wage is supposed to be covering it, it's never enough. It's just never enough. And there's not the upward mobility that you want to have for people. It really is problematic. The other thing that happens when you raise minimum wage is that the wages that are pegged against that, higher than that, when you know that minimum wage is at $7.25, there's a class of employees that you want to get to do most of the jobs that are out there, and you might want to pay $10 an hour or $12 an hour. But when minimum wage goes up to $9, those jobs have to go up too, because it's not fair for those workers to suddenly be being paid minimum wage. You know, they're not far enough away from it. And so that's going to happen. And when all that happens, then prices go up to cover that as well. The problem is that if prices go up and people can't pay those prices, what you end up seeing is fewer customers and businesses close. Another thing that happens when you start raising wages artificially like this is that you will go on.
Delegate Bagby.
Would the gentleman yield for a question?
Will the delegate yield?
I will yield when I'm finished.
Okay.
Delegate Head.
The other thing that happens is that when you start raising minimum wage and raising wages artificially, businesses look around for alternatives to those employees. All you need to do is walk into any McDonald's restaurant right now and look at the number of kiosks that you have where you can place your order, and look at how few people are manning cash registers behind the line. Those used to be jobs. They are jobs no more because it's cheaper and more efficient to have a kiosk out there to take those orders. Also, when I was in, I went into Kroger when I was home last weekend, saw a really interesting thing. Just as I was late leaving, coming back to Richmond last Sunday night, the floors were being swept by a robot because it's cheaper than the employee, and they don't need the people anymore. So raise the wages like this artificially, and you're going to create more problems. You can make statistics say whatever you want them to say, but I'm telling you, as a business owner, this is reality, and it will have a negative impact. The final thing that I will say on this is just the rate at which it is going up. We're doing it. Even with this, what we're doing is giving minimum wage a 31% raise in one shot. 31% raise in one shot. You think that's good? You think that's good? You start asking businesses how they're going to pay for that, it's going to be problematic. And then turning around the next year and adding another 13% raise on top of that. If you do that, and then we've already passed legislation this session that's going to then mandate a paid sick leave that, as I've testified here on the floor, is going to end up raising wage costs across the board minimally 5% more. This is a huge burden on businesses. Now, it's a good idea that we've pushed this off until January, but it's an awful long way to go, and it will have negative consequences, and you just really, really need to be thinking about that. Now, if Delegate Bagby would like to have me yield for a question, I'll be happy to.
Delegate Bagby.
Mr. Gentleman, what group of laborers should go home to their families? I've heard him talk about people that work at McDonald's, people that work at Kroger's. What groups of laborers should go home to their families without making a living wage?
Delegate Head.
High school students that work in ice cream parlors, okay? The college student that is working maybe a part-time job to help make some extra spending money while they're in school. Those are typically the jobs that are earning minimum wage, not providing for families. That would be the categories of folks that don't need to be making a living wage, because that's not what this was designed to be.
Delegate Bagby.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The delegate from Fairfax County, Delegate Krizik.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to, speaking to the bill,
Delegate Krizik, you have
I'd
the floor.
like to read something and correct the record here. It seems to me to be equally plain that no business which depends for existence on paying less than living wages to its workers has any right to continue in this country. That's President Franklin Delano Roosevelt when he introduced the first statutory minimum wages back in 1938. This is not, in some cases, people are relying on minimum wage to make it. Many of them are working 2 and 3 jobs. And the high school kids are exempt already. So I think now is the time. We've waited 12 years. We're ready for a minimum wage increase. And this is a judicious plan. It's not $15 right away. It's going to phase in over 6 years. And I want to thank my colleague, Delegate Ward, for her leadership on this and all the work that she's put in. Thank you very much.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Simon.
Madam Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Delegate Simon, you have the floor.
Madam Speaker, members of the House, I'm also a small business owner and an entrepreneur, and I just think it's important that we get up and have these discussions that the business doesn't speak with one voice about this, and most of the business people that I know support paying their workers and paying all workers a living wage because one job should be enough. The arguments that we heard from the delegate for Botetourt are arguments against a minimum wage, any minimum wage. Right? I mean, the fact is the minimum wage, the strategy on that side of the aisle is to eliminate the minimum wage altogether through attrition. It hasn't been raised since in years. It has the less buying power now than it did 10 years ago, than it did 20 years ago. It's way off of its peak in 1968. If you make $7.25 an hour, Madam Speaker, you're making $14,000, $15,000 a year. No one can live on that. But what happens is it's not young people. Young people are many of our hourly workers, but it's not just that. It's a lot of people that have to work 2 and 3 jobs, and they have to work shifts. It's people that work as home health care workers, taking care of our elderly and disabled families in the morning, starting at 4 in the morning and going until 2 in the afternoon, and then they come home and have something to eat, and then they go out to their second job, and they take their kids and help them with their homework for a few hours, and they go out to that third job. That's what we're talking about, trying to survive on a wage. It's not just about kids scooping ice cream in the summertime. Madam Speaker, members of the House, this is a great bill. This is a fantastic compromise. This gets us on the road to where we need to be, to where one job is enough. That's what we believe in on this side of the aisle. That's what we believe. That's what Virginians voted for, by the way, Madam Speaker. We all ran on a promise of raising the wage, and that's why we're here. Madam Speaker, I hope it's the pleasure of this body to support this excellent bill. Let's get us on the road to $15 an hour. Let's pass this conference report.
The delegate from Fairfax County, Delegate Tran.
Good evening, Madam Speaker. This is actually, I think, my first point of personal privilege in 3 sessions. I'm sorry, it's not even a point of personal privilege, but I'm speaking to the bill, and this is the first time I'm speaking to somebody else's bill and not my own in 3 sessions. I'm a little bit emotional because I was asking my mom to refresh my memory, but my family came to the United States as boat refugees from Vietnam in 1980. My mother was in her late 20s, my father in his early 30s. My father was a practicing dentist in Vietnam and had served in the South Vietnamese Army, but at that time, our family did not have the means for my father to go to school in the US and get relicensed as a dentist here. So he thought he could find a job as a dental technician. It's in his field, and a job that only requires a high school diploma. Here he was, a college graduate, had a graduate degree, he was a practicing dentist, but he couldn't find a job. Over and over and over, he was told he was either overqualified or that his English skills were simply not good enough. But then Mr. Sam took a chance on my father. Mr. Sam saw somebody who could quickly adapt to a dental lab setting in the US, somebody who had experience that he could perhaps share with others in the office. And my father was so excited, and he did just that. He mentored younger workers while learning the language of his craft in the US. My dad worked for Mr. Sam, his first job in the US, for minimum wage. In 82, 83, that was $3.35 an hour. My mother has kept that pay stub all these years. My mom had a job that paid $5.25. She would leave our apartment to catch 2 buses. She left at 6 a.m. in order to get to work at 9 a.m. She just told me that sometimes the transit bus didn't come, or where she had to, catch the second bus, it didn't come, or it was late, and she would call her boss, and he would come and pick her up, and that extra half-hour trip on the bus was only a 10-minute car ride. We lived in Southern California, and while it was not cold by our standards here in Virginia, it was cold for my mother, who grew up in the tropics. And we certainly didn't have a lot of money. So when my mom was pregnant with my brother, she stood at the bus stop, and those nice ladies who rode the bus with her would give them their sweaters so she would be warm at 6 a.m. in the morning. And our family of 4 lived in a 1-bedroom apartment for several years. My parents stretching and stretching and stretching their paychecks from their minimum and low-wage jobs. And over time, they were able to fulfill their American dream. My dad was a small business owner twice over. He opened his own dental lab, and he then became a practicing dentist. And now they're both happily retired. I tell you this story because as much as my family struggled 30 years ago in their minimum and low-wage jobs, it's harder for families today. Because, Madam Speaker, the minimum wage of $3.35 nearly 30 years ago is $8.96 in today's dollars. And that is more than our minimum wage of $7.25, and that simply astounds me. And if my family was worried about making rent, taking care of extended family members, told me over and over and over again that a 99-cent fruit roll-up was just too expensive sometimes, spending 3 to 6 hours a day catching a bus both ways and then having to pay for childcare, stretching and stretching and stretching that paycheck. And let me say again, $3.35 in the early 80s is worth more today than our minimum wage of $7.25. It is high time we raise that minimum wage to give our Virginian families a stronger foothold in the American dream, and I certainly hope it'll be the will of the body tonight to pass this bill.
The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Sullivan.
Madam Speaker, I rise with a motion.
Delegate Sullivan, you have the floor.
I move the pending question.
All those in favor of the motion to move the pending question shall say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the pending question
Madam Speaker,
is called.
parliamentary inquiry.
Yes, delegate from Albemarle, Delegate Bell.
Are there any remaining speakers? We've had a 2-hour debate yesterday
Speaker,
where the
point of
debate
order.
was allowed
Yes,
to go on for 2
Delegate
hours.
from Fairfax,
And in
Delegate-
fact, the gentleman
Delegate
from
Simon.
Fairfax demanded that
This
we not
motion is
have.
not debatable. There are people
not
on both
parliamentary
sides
inquiry.
that are waiting. It's also very late. There are many people on both sides of the aisle still waiting. I've made a motion. There's a motion on the floor. Anything else is out of order. All those in favor of the motion to move the pending question shall say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Pending question is called. All those in favor of Delegate Sullivan's motion to move the pending question will vote on the electronic voting board. All those in favor of the motion to move the pending question shall vote aye. The clerk shall close the roll.
Ayes 53, nays 45, abstentions 0.
Ayes 53, nays 45, abstentions 0. The motion to move the pending question is granted. Shall the conference report be agreed to?
Speaker.
The clerk shall destroy the roll. Shall the conference report be agreed to? The clerk shall close the roll.
Ayes 54, nays 45, abstentions 0.
Ayes 54, nays 45, abstentions 0. The conference report is agreed to. The House will be at ease.
The House stand in recess until 10:45 p.m.
All those in favor of Delegate Simon's motion to stand in recess till 10:45 shall say aye. Aye. Those opposed, the House stands in recess until 10:45.
Speaker, the Senate has requested second committees of conference on the following legislation: Senate Bill 272, Senate Bill 384, Senate Bill 575, and Senate Bill 588.
The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House accede to the request of the Senate for committees of conference on the previously reported legislation.
Shall the motion by Delegate Herring be adopted? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? The motion is adopted. Does the clerk have any additional announcements or communications?
Yes, Madam Speaker. The Speaker has appointed conferees to the following legislation: House Bill 375, Delegates Willett, Keem, and Collins. House Bill 375, Delegates Willett, Keem, and Collins. House Bill 785, Delegate Watts, Hudson, and Kilgore. House Bill 785, Delegates Watts, Hudson, and Kilgore. House Bill 798, Delegates Delaney, Heretic, and Miarez. House Bill 798, Delegates Delaney, Heretic, and Miarez. House Bill 896, Delegates Sickles, Simon, Moorfield. House Bill 896, Delegates Sickles, Simon, and Moorfield. House Bill 972, Delegates Herring, Heretic, and Collins. House Bill 972, Delegates Herring, Heretic, and Collins. House Bill 1056, Delegates Adams of Richmond City, Rasool, and Davis. House Bill 1056, Delegates Adams of Richmond City, Rasool, and Davis. House Bill 1552, Delegates Levine, Goditis, and Ferris. House Bill 1552, Delegates Levine, Goditis, and Ferris. Senate Bill 384, Delegates Sickles, Simon, and Moorfield. Senate Bill 384, Delegates Sickles, Simon, and Moorfield. Senate Bill 575, Delegates Hurst, Adams of Richmond City, and Hodges. Senate Bill 575, Delegates Hurst, Adams of Richmond City, and Hodges. Senate Bill 588, Delegates Watts, Hudson, and Kilgore. Senate Bill 588, Delegates Watts, Hudson, and Kilgore. Senate Bill 272, Delegates Levine, Goditis, and Ferris. Senate Bill 272, Delegates Levine, Goditis, and Ferris.
The House will be at ease. The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand for a motion.
Delegate Herring, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I believe this will be House Joint Resolution 508.
Will the clerk please report the resolution?
House Joint Resolution number 508, amending Rule 22 of House Joint Resolution number 99 of the 2020 regular session of the General Assembly of Virginia relating to the sine die date of such session and the adoption of conference reports. Resolved by the House of Delegates, the Senate concurring, that Rule 22 of House Joint Resolution number 99 of the 2020 regular session of the General Assembly of Virginia is amended and reenacted as follows. Rule 22, new language, with the exception of any conference report on a budget bill, no conference report shall be adopted by the House of Delegates or the Senate after 6 p.m. on Sunday, March 8, 2020. Regular language, this session of the General Assembly shall adjourn sine die no later than, then strike, the legislative day of Saturday, March 7, insert 11:59 p.m. on Thursday, March 12, 2020.
Delegate Herring.
Madam Speaker, if I move adoption of the resolution, if I could speak to that motion briefly.
Delegate Herring.
Madam Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, this resolution will allow us to extend session so not everything dies at midnight. The plan is, again, as in the resolution, to come back tomorrow, but we will have just a limited time to finish our conference reports by 6 p.m., then give time for the publication of the budget bill and 48 hours to lay on the desk, and then we'll come back on Thursday to vote for the budget bill. I'm going to confirm with the Senate about what time in the morning we can convene. I think it's important that we sort of coordinate things so we have the best opportunity to get all our bills, our conference reports passed. And I hope the members vote for this resolution.
Shall the resolution be agreed to?
Madam Speaker.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just reviewing the document. Would the majority leader yield for a question?
Yes,
Will the delegate yield?
I'm happy to yield.
Delegate Gilbert.
So it's my understanding, Madam Speaker, that the resolution will simply allow for conference reports to be concluded by 6 p.m. tomorrow, along with the budget bill, and that it's the delegate's intention or the body's intention that we would essentially leave that Thursday, 11:59 p.m. simply for voting on the budget bill. Is that understanding correct?
That is my understanding, Madam Speaker, but I do have I don't know if it's appropriate for a point of order here or whether we should go at ease, because I do know that judges are pending. I just want to make sure that it doesn't preclude us for doing judges too.
Madam Speaker, in light of... Cut me off. It's got to be in there. It's got to be in there.
The House will be at ease.
I believe we left off with my motion to adopt House Joint Resolution 508.
Shall the resolution be agreed to? The clerk shall close the roll.
Ayes 99, nays 0, abstentions 0.
Ayes 99, nays 0, abstention 0. The resolution is adopted. The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring, will now communicate the action of the House to the other body. The House will be at ease.
No, we gotta send it.
Oh, they're not going to go.
Madam Speaker, a message from the Senate.
Good evening, Senator.
Good evening, Madam Speaker. I have been directed by the President of the Senate to inform the House of Delegates that the Senate has agreed to House Joint Resolution 508.
Per House Rule 51, the House is returned to morning hour. Does the clerk have any additional announcements or communications?
Madam Speaker, I only have one important announcement, which is tomorrow is daylight savings time. So remember to spring forward. Everybody got it?
The delegate from Prince William, Delegate Torian.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I want to just take a quick moment and give everyone an update on where we are with the budget. I shared with you earlier during the course of the day that we had made progress that in areas of public education, commerce, and natural resources, public safety and general government, and throughout the course of the evening, we worked to resolve our differences and issues in the area of higher education, compensation, and capital outlay. I'm happy to report to you that those issues have been resolved. We have a budget. It will be online Monday afternoon, 12 noon. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that when the House adjourned today, it adjourn to reconvene tomorrow, March 8th at 11 a.m.
The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring, moves that when the House adjourned today, it adjourn to reconvene tomorrow, March 8th at 11 o'clock. As many as favor that motion shall say aye. Those opposed, the motion is agreed to. Delegate Herring.
Madam Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring, moves the House to now adjourn. As many as favor that motion shall say aye. Those opposed, the motion is agreed to. The House stands adjourned until Sunday, March 8th at 11 o'clock.